are now facing east. What you see in front of you is Syria. And actually, we completed the north. Tomorrow you'll be in Jordan. So the only border you haven't seen so far is with Egypt. Now, what happened is that in 1967, Israel was attacked by the Syrians from the north, and the Egyptians from the south, and the Jordanians from the east. The total population of Israel at that time was 2.5 million people. We were surrounded by 250 million. So the ratio is 250 million versus 2.5 million. Not a great encouraging situation.
Yeah.
Now you have to understand that in Israel there is a compulsory service. Everyone has to serve in the military for 3 years, and the girls 2 years. So when you're 18, you start serving each one based on what he's capable of doing, sometimes what he wants to do if he volunteered to special forces or whatever. But this is women go for 2 years. So this is pretty much the situation. But the time you serve in the military is basically half of it is to train you to become a soldier and to teach you and discipline you, and then maybe a little bit more than half of the time you're actually a real productive, so to speak, soldier. But the Israeli defense depends very much on the people who do the reserve force. So once you finish the service, you are 21 years old. You serve until you're about 40, 35, 50, depends on your physical ability and based on the unit. If you're a driver, you can drive until you're 50. If you're a combat soldier, maybe 30, 35 or so. If you are in a tank, maybe also 35 or more years old. But this is pretty much the situation. So in 1967, when there was this tension between Israel and the three countries around us, after about 1 month, Israel realized that we cannot wait any longer, because think about it, that's only 2.5 million people. The military is very, very small. If everyone, the whole population is 2.5, so think about how small the military was. The entire Air Force was about 200 airplanes. That's the whole story. So, and all the people were, including the reservists, were in the military. So basically, there was no one to drive buses, to drive trucks, and a very difficult situation. So when we realized that the situation got to a point that Israel had to do something, and this is where the Israeli Air Force actually took off, and in 3 hours destroyed all the airplanes, or almost all the airplanes of the enemy on the ground. And within 6 days, the size of Israel tripled. So we took the West Bank, a big chunk of all around us, including the Sinai Desert, that was by itself 3 times bigger. So actually the size of the country was about 4 or 5 times bigger than what it was just a couple of days earlier. And including Israel took Jerusalem, and we'll speak about it when we'll be in Jerusalem. So this is the situation now. The problem is that we thought, especially our leaders, I was young, that no one would ever think about fighting against Israel anymore. Because if we did this tremendous operation, and within 6 days won against all the armies around us, no one would be so stupid to try again. We were the stupid. Because the first mistake was that we were trying to understand our enemy based on our values. We think we come from a different culture. We think a different way. They think different way. So what looks stupid to us looks exactly the opposite to them, and the other way around. So instead of preparing the military, the army, for everyone for the next war, we thought that there's no need for that. So the generals and all the heroes of the Six-Day War actually become celebrities, and they were all over, and then they forgot that their job was to think about the next war and not about the war of the past. This is the problem with generals. They always fight the war of the past instead of thinking ahead. And guess what? It didn't take long, but 6 years later, Israel was attacked by surprise. Because again, we thought that the intelligence, the Israeli intelligence is very good and was very good. So we had a lot of information about what the enemy was about to do. But we again said, oh, that's false information, because they're not going to fight against us, right? Because 6 years earlier, we won big time, by knockout first round, like in the ring. So who's stupid to fight against you if you knock him down in a couple of minutes? So anyway, make a long story short, on October 6, 1973, it's Saturday, 1:55 p.m. The Israeli forces were attacked. Now, this is Yom Kippur. You know what's Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is the holiest day in the Israeli and the Jewish calendar. A lot of the soldiers were home. Think about it, 1973, no telephones, no cell phones. Very few people even had telephone at home. Very, very few. So communication was, of course, different than today. So the soldiers who were in around here didn't believe that there would be a war, and they saw that they were attacked by airplanes. They realized that these were not the Israeli airplanes, because Israeli airplanes should not fly on that day for any reason. And then when they started to feel the bombs falling, they realized that, wow, we have a problem. So what happened around here was that fortunately we had a very, very experienced battalion not far from here, about 6 kilometers away. They were not here in positions because they didn't know that there would be a war. But then they said, oh, what's going on? Think about it, the soldiers didn't eat since the day before, because Yom Kippur you fast, you don't eat. Most of the soldiers, some eat, but in the military there is no food, you just get a sandwich or something. So anyway, they got the order to move to the positions. Now, we're talking about an Armed Corps battalion, the 77th Brigade, the 7th Brigade, 77th Battalion, not important. So, when a tank drives on a road, like we did on asphalt, it doesn't leave much behind. It destroys the whole thing. So they don't drive on asphalt unless there's an emergency. So the order they got is not to drive on the asphalt, because they didn't want to destroy it, drive on the side. This is how much they didn't understand what was going on. At the very same time, this valley in front of you was filled with hundreds and hundreds of tanks of the Syrian army, infantry, artillery, airplanes, and they were coming here. So these guys drove slowly, and eventually they arrived here and said, what the shit is going on? And they couldn't believe that this was what. Now we're talking about very few tanks. One battalion, and they're so half of the Syrian army tried to penetrate through here. So it took 3 days, actually 4 days and 3 nights, for these brave soldiers to stop many more tanks that they were facing. And it came down to the point that not the generals were fighting here, but the corporals, the privates, the sergeants. Because this comes to the point that there's no plan, there's no, the whole thing fell apart. It came down to the individual tank and the 4 people in the tank. None of the crew that started the war together, 4 soldiers, finished the 3 days together, because many got killed and wounded, so they would anyone, they took two tanks, put the people in one tank, and move on. A lot of times that disabled and stuff. So after 4 days, the Israeli headquarters realized it's more important to send reinforcement to this place to any other front because this is, you see, it took us like what 30 minutes to come from the Banyas to here. So 1 hour for the Syrian tanks to come to the Israeli towns. So it was very, very important to come here and stop them. In the south, there's a big desert. So they said, well, forget about that. We can manage this later. So this is what happened here. And eventually, after 4 days, reinforcement arrived with reservists. Because it took a lot of time to get them together and drive them to the places and then get them up and so on. So this is what happened here. So the name of this valley just in front of you is the Valley of Tears, because we shed so much blood here and so many soldiers actually gave their life. So it sounds as a cliche, but it's not. That they actually with their own body stopped the enemy from penetrating the lines and simply go. Once there was nothing between the enemy and the towns and the people, the young men and women and children and babies, but the very few tanks that were here and a little bit south. So this is what happened right here, and this is as a big lesson to us. We learned it the hard way, you know, that you never ever try to predict what your enemy is going to do based on different culture, because it's simply different culture. After that, after 1973, we made peace with Egypt, and then we made peace with Jordan. And the lesson is that if you want to have peace with your enemies, you must do it from a position of strength. You have to, because otherwise, it's you don't have the upper hand. So you come to the table of negotiation from a position that you have you know what's going on. You have a confidence. You have a military that understands the situation, and this led us to peace. So we have. The peace with Egypt is not great. It's not like Canada and the United States or countries that are Switzerland and France or whatever. It's different. But since 1978, when we signed the peace agreement with Egypt, no Israeli soldier died fighting them, and no Egyptian soldier died fighting Israel. And the same thing with Jordan. So Middle East is different, you know, with different culture and different religions. But eventually, fortunately, we have peace. So this is why you can tomorrow morning go to the border, cross the Jordan, come back, and we can go to Egypt and come back, and this is the situation. So, but we have to remember that again, this is not Switzerland. So things can change very quickly. Different reasons. It's changed in Egypt, you know, because they changed the prime minister there. He was very Islamic extremist. Unfortunately, now we have a guy who is a friend with Israel because he understands, not that he likes us, not that he loves us, but he understands that it makes much more sense to invest in your economy and improve the life of the people rather than to put the money that you don't have in the military. Not always the people know it. The people, it's very easy to manipulate people. Oh, let's go fight the Jews or fight Israel, and or let's have peace with Israel and invest in education and hospitals and improve the life of people. So this is the situation as it is now. What we have, the two tanks that Pastor Joe mentioned, tells the story of the war that was here that I just told you about. You have two tanks. You have the Israeli tank and you have the Syrian tank. The Israeli tank, of course, it just doesn't move. It's a memorial. It's a junk, but it was a junk even when we used it in the war. Because Israel
Left over.
exactly. Israel purchased this tank from Britain. It's called Centurion, and it was so the British Army didn't want it, didn't need this anymore. So Israel purchased this. We changed the engine, a little improvement to the gun. That's pretty much what it was. On the other hand, the Soviets provided this T-62, which was the top of the line of all the technology. Provided this to the Syrians, and the main difference was that what you see, the projector on the gun. You see there's something kind of a little thing hanging on it. This is a projector of a night vision capability, which even in 1973 it worked, meaning at night the driver or the gunner or whoever would have some kind of goggles and he could see you almost like in daylight. But you didn't see this because it's an ultra something. On the other hand, the Israeli tanks didn't have this. So at night, they couldn't see what was going on. So they were pretty much shooting in the door, hopefully would hit enemy tank, and with the flames they would see what was going on. But regardless, eventually they had the upper hand, and this is what it says, that the man in the tank wins. It's not the tank, it's not so much the technology or the engine or whatever, but the determination of the soldiers and the commanders. Now the soldiers, as you probably know, don't fight for their country, they fight for their comrades. This is how they are being trained. They take high school kids after they finish the high school and bring them to whatever unit, depends on where you find yourself, and then they put you in situations that there's no way you can get out of the situation unless you help others and they help you. And this is all aimed to the point that when you find yourself in trouble in a war, you fight for the guy who sits next to you, or walk with you, or run with you, or fight with you. That's the thing. The other thing is that the soldiers in this thing were fighting for democracy. The soldiers in this thing, dictatorship. And always in history, eventually soldiers or countries of democracy wins against dictatorship. See what happened in Germany and what happened fighting against Japan. So not always dictatorship official, but it's the whole regime. The other thing is that in the Israeli army, and I guess in other armies as well of free countries, they train the soldiers to think big, meaning if you find yourself in a situation that there's nobody around, you have to take command. You have all the authority to do whatever you think is necessary, according to what you can understand from the immediate situation. Whereas if you fight for the dictatorship, you're not allowed to do anything, because the dictator doesn't want you to think too much, because then next time you think, oh, I'm going to replace the guy, you know. So you do exactly what you're being told. That's it. No one expects you to do anything. Don't take initiative. Don't be a big hero, or as we call it in Hebrew, a big head. Keep your head small. Your brain inside the skull. So what happened was when the Syrians actually were able to break through some of the Israeli positions in the far south, they didn't continue, because they said, well, this is not part of the plan. I got orders just to move and stop. but I don't want to move further because somebody in Damascus is going to punish me or stuff like that. Or in every little situation. And this whole thing made these people, although these guys were superior with the equipment, these people won the war. Eventually, with the great loss of lives. There was one situation, the tanks, they have about 70 shells and a limited amount of fuel. So after some time, they run out of ammunition and they run out of fuel. So what they have to do, they have to go back to a position where they can refuel and change get more ammunition and treat the soldiers who are wounded and get fresh ones and go back to positions. So they did it several times in these 3 days or so. They didn't sleep, they hardly ate. I don't know how they went to the bathroom, who knows. Eventually they got to the point after about 2 or 3 days that when they were coming back from that place toward the front, they were so exhausted and they were so tired and probably afraid of what was going on, seeing all their friends dying, or a lot of their friends dying next to them. In some cases, nothing left of the body because it exploded, that they could not move on. The tank stopped and the guy said, "We cannot move on." So this was a point of a make or break. And the commander of this battalion actually realized what was going on. He asked, in a tank you have 4 people, the crew, 4 people. There's a tank commander and other 3. The communication goes between the people in the tank and the commander to his commander. So otherwise there will be chaos. So this general, he was a lieutenant colonel at the time. He asked all the people to be on one network. So everyone, the driver, the gunner, the loader, everyone could hear what he had to say. And he told them something like that he understood the situation. He said, "I know that you are exhausted. I know that we lost a lot of our comrades. But what do you think? The enemy is going to win?" So he said, "Look, I'm moving forward. Anyone who wants to move forward with me, you do it. If you don't want, that's okay, I understand." And he moved. So now comes to the point that they understand that if they don't move, the guy next to them is going to get a much more dangerous situation because they need more tanks. And this is when they eventually all moved. And this was a very key point. And eventually, again, after about 4 days, not only that they stopped the enemy, but they pushed the enemy all the way to almost to Damascus. Israel could go easily to Damascus, but of course, what would we do in Damascus? So this is, in a nutshell, the situation. So what we should take from here is that to understand that Israel is a very small country and the military is very small. People don't understand the Israeli military is a very small force, heavily relying on reservists, older people with families, and they have to leave everything behind, go to war. And when you say fight for your family in Israel, it's such a small country that you fight your family literally. And there's a cemetery not far from here we didn't visit that people were born near the cemetery and they're killed here. So some people were killed about 10 minutes away from home during that war, fighting for their country, fighting for their family. So you literally fight for your family. Maybe 20 minutes, 10 minutes, or half an hour from home. If you go as far as you can go in Israel, it's 2 hours from home or 3 hours from home. So it's a very, very, very different situation. So this is the story in a nutshell of this place, and hopefully we'll never ever find ourselves in this situation. I hope.